About 70 years after the Babylonian Empire destroyed the temple in Jerusalem, God brought the people of Judah back from Babylonian captivity as he had promised. In 538 BC, King Cyrus of Persia conquered Babylon and issued an edict, allowing the Jewish people to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. This was a historic moment that marked the end of the 70 years of captivity foretold by the prophet Jeremiah and demonstrated the fulfillment of God's covenant. The first return took place under the leadership of Zerubbabel, a descendant of the Davidic royal family, and Joshua, the high priest. Nearly 50,000 people of Judah returned to Jerusalem. Their first task was to rebuild the altar of burnt offering and restore worship and sacrifice to God. Then they laid the foundation of a new temple on the site where Solomon's temple had once stood. The people cried out with both joy and tears. The younger generation rejoiced because they saw a new beginning before them. But the older generation remembered the glory of Solomon's temple and wept as they looked upon the smaller foundation of the new temple. The rebuilding did not go smoothly. The surrounding peoples, including the Samaritans, sought to participate in the construction. When their request was rejected, they began to oppose the Jews and to bring accusations before the Persian government. Political pressure, opposition from neighboring peoples, and internal economic difficulties brought the construction to a halt. For many years, the work of rebuilding the temple was suspended for about 16 years. But God did not abandon his people. He raised up the prophets Haggai and Zechariah to awaken the people from their spiritual discouragement and call them back to the work of rebuilding. Haggai challenged the people because they were building beautiful houses for themselves while God's temple remained in ruins. He called them to put God's house first and return to the work of rebuilding. Zechariah encouraged the people through a series of visions and proclaimed that God would restore Jerusalem and complete the rebuilding of his temple. To Zerubbabel, God declared that the work would not ultimately be accomplished by human strength. It would be accomplished by the Spirit of God, not by might, not by power, but by my Spirit. God also promised that the hands of Zerubbabel, who had laid the foundation of the temple, would finish the work. These words gave courage and hope to a discouraged people. The work began again in earnest during the reign of Darius I, when the Persian king confirmed the earlier decree of Cyrus. The temple was finally completed on the 3rd day of the month of Adar in the 6th year of King Darius. The year was 516 BC. After nearly 70 years since the destruction of Solomon's temple, the house of God stood again in Jerusalem. The second temple era had begun. The book of Ezra records the moment on the 3rd day of the month of Adar in the 6th year of King Darius. The work of the temple was finished. The people then dedicated the temple to God. They offered sacrifices and restored the ministry of the priests and Levites according to the law of Moses. The worship of God was restored. The priesthood was restored. The sacrifices were restored. The community of God's people was restored. Then the returned exiles celebrated the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. They remembered the mighty salvation of God in the days of the Exodus. They also celebrated God's new deliverance from Babylonian captivity. The God who had delivered Israel from Egypt had once again delivered his people from oppression. The God who had opened the Red Sea had opened the way home from Babylon. The Zerubbabel temple did not equal Solomon's temple in size or outward splendor, yet its importance was not measured by the greatness of its stones or the beauty of its appearance. It stood as a testimony that God's presence had not abandoned his people. It stood as a testimony that God's covenant had not failed. It stood as a testimony that God's promises were still moving toward fulfillment. Through the prophet Haggai, God declared that the latter glory of this temple would be greater than its former glory. The promise pointed beyond the physical appearance of the building. It pointed toward the greater fulfillment of God's redemptive purpose. Hundreds of years later, Herod the Great greatly expanded and beautified the second temple, and into that temple came Jesus Christ. Jesus taught there. Jesus proclaimed the kingdom of God there. Jesus confronted corruption there. Jesus revealed the purpose of the temple there. The temple that began with Zerubbabel became part of the setting for the ministry of the Messiah. The story that began with destruction moved toward restoration. The story that began with captivity captivity moved toward freedom. The story that began with captivity moved toward freedom. The story that began with tears moved toward hope.